What's happening, everybody? Hi, welcome to the program. It is October 22nd, 2024. This is the Jeff Gerstmann Show, your home for the things that matter in the world of video games. I'm your host for this week's edition of the show. My name is Jeff Gerstmann, and here we are once again to talk about video games. There's a thing that happens at the beginning of this show when I transition from the title card to the camera feed, where I hit that button to change the view and then also lower the audio of the music ever so slightly, and it's a little two-hand jam here, and invariably I get my hands in position to do the thing that I need to do. And then I'm there for about 8 seconds or so, depending on when I remember to do it. And at some point over those 8 seconds, I completely go up. I'm like, wait, what am I doing? Like every single week, there's like a, wait, what do I, okay, hang on. And I need to look at this monitor to make sure that the mouse is in the right place. And I need to like ground myself and go, okay, all right, yes. Yes, right. It's a podcast. How did we find ourselves in this situation? Just wake up at 5 minutes away from being live on a podcast. That's just how it is every single week. How's everybody doing? Hi. We're here. We're here. The week you've been waiting for is upon us. That's right. It's the week where Call of Duty is out. You thought it was Madden that brought back video games, but no. No, I don't know. Friday is the day for Call of Duty. It's interesting the way they roll this thing out now. I admire their audacity when it comes to the way they handle. So if you don't play Call of Duty, you'll never know this. For the last few years now, they have just been like, you launch it in Steam and the same thing. They've been updating the existing like icon on your console dashboard to contain the new game for the past, I guess this is probably now the third year of them doing that. They tried it in a different format before, and then they like, okay. And so basically what happens is like your game patches with a new game in it, and the old game is still there too. It's all treated as DLC. It's like from the like navigating what you have installed and don't have installed, it's kind of a mess. Once you get used to it, you're like, oh, okay, I like this is okay. This is how I uninstall the old game to save on some disk space and what have you. But like, there's a thing they do, and for this entire week, everyone gets to experience it. There's a thing they do where, by default, they load the current game. And so if you want to load last year's game, when you go to that, it pops up a menu that says like, all right, we're launching that game. And then it sits there for a while. And you're like, why is this taking forever? And you're like, oh, because it's unloading the thing that I had loaded to load up last year's game. Like, why, boy, what if I could just launch last year's game from Steam, from the Xbox, from the console menu? But no, they force you into whatever the current game is. And so right now, this patch happened yesterday. Where it like suddenly like the Steam client for Call of Duty took like 100 gig patch, and you're like, whoa, okay. It has the Black Ops 6 launcher now, and so they've updated all of it for the current year game, meaning the game launching this week. So even if you're trying to play it this week, and you're trying to play Modern Warfare 3, the current Call of Duty game, you have to launch this shell and now pick Modern Warfare 3. And then it says, okay, we're launching Modern Warfare 3. And it sits there for a while, and that goes away. And then it brings up the previous game. And so it's this weird built-in thing they do You know, everyone, when a new phone comes out, everyone complains. They're like, my phone worked great until the new ones came out and then they sabotaged it. This is an actual case of that happening. Where if you just for whatever reason weren't going to buy the current year's game, every time you launch, it will launch to the shell for the current game. And you will be forced to then go and load a previous game and go, all right. And like there's, as far as I can tell, unless there's a command line trigger you can throw in there on Steam or something, you're basically forced to like launch and relaunch a game. It's a minor, like in the grand scheme of things, it's whatever. But like I said, I admire the audacity of them to just go like, well, what? You're getting the new one, right? Why would you fucking sit there and wait for the other one to launch? Because you're never going to play it again, right? And it's just crazy. And so for this week, everyone gets to experience the magic of that if they decide they want to play Modern Warfare 3, because now the launcher is all done up in all the Black Ops 6 menu schemes and colors and whatever, and music and all of that. And yeah, it's I hate that they're still doing it. I can't believe they're still doing it. I would have thought that after Modern Warfare 3 and seeing how it all goes, and like I don't get what the benefit is of them burying all of these games in one launcher instead of just like, give me separate icons on the dash, on my PlayStation, on my Xbox, whatever. Here's the one for Black Ops 6. Here's the one for Modern Warfare. But instead, it's all this Call of Duty HQ thing that they've now centralized everything around. And it just makes like every little bit of that just makes it a little bit weirder. I don't know. Like it has like, I suppose, benefits if you care about like, you know, your hours played on Steam just keeps going up because it's still the same launcher. And so now I have something like 200 hours in Call of Duty because it counts Modern Warfare 3 and Modern Warfare 2 as the same thing. And I think maybe Modern Warfare 1's a separate one. But it feels like a like weird loophole they're exploiting that like, I'm surprised. Yeah, someone, Psychus in the chat says, surprised the platform holders let them do it. Yeah, I'm kind of with you. It's weird because they add a bunch of trophies and achievements for the current year's campaign to kind of the same thing. And I think they're doing the same thing this year. I haven't checked. But it's just a really weird... It's just weird, man. I don't know. At the end of the day, like there's no one else is doing it like that. But also like they're treating the game as if it is an ongoing contiguous product, right? And if you're playing Warzone, which is free to play, then it is a contiguous, you know, it is a free, the same way Fortnite is, the same way Minecraft, you know, like you know, whatever updates they have, here you go, and then you're in your launcher and you go. But like this is a separate game that they are in theory selling stuff for and whatever else. Justin Taco Bellis says there's no new platinum trophy. I thought I could have sworn that I saw a platinum trophy. There was a trophy list that leaked. I'm gonna have to look this up now. The trophies were out a couple of days ago. And I thought I saw a platinum in that list. Yeah, it says there is a platinum. Decorated agent, unlock all trophies in Call of Duty Black Ops 6. And that's probably, so on PlayStation you can break DLC out into a separate sub game, and so I wonder if that's what they're doing. I bet that's a thing you could probably go look at on the dashboard now, because it's in this weird state of like, well, the game's out and they've updated the launcher and whatever, but the game is not actually, the content isn't out until Friday or whatever the hell else. It's a really strange situation. I think they should unfuck that. I think that that's something that like they should stop doing. And it makes sense that maybe they did it this year, because I don't know what the benefit is, and maybe there's some really obvious like, hey, by hoarding all these numbers together under one launcher, it makes our players, our player counts look better on Steam, and makes this look, there's some stat they're gaming somewhere by combining it all, because it doesn't feel like and maybe this is the actual intended goal. Like I could see this being like someone in some part of the process when coming up with the idea of just like, no, let's have the same launcher and we'll do this, a world of Call of Duty. Like, I could see that being something where they go, this is really convenient for people. But in execution, I think it's the opposite of that. So if their goal is to make this like more convenient of a transition for people, or to like if they want to play multiple games and kind of have them all right there, I think that this is actually worse than just like letting people launch the games separately the way that it used to be for years and years and years and years. It's a clunky setup that feels like they're like exploiting some weird loophole in the way that all of these digital platforms work, I guess. But yeah, I don't know. That's neither. Who cares? Also, who cares? Also, at the end of the day, the people that care are people that really like Modern Warfare 3 and don't intend to buy Black Ops 6 or play Black Ops 6. Is actually probably there are people who are getting a worse experience as a result of all of this, and it's people who don't play the current year's game. So that I don't want to sell those people short, because that is a thing. Speaking of shooters, there's another one that kind of launched out of nowhere last week at the Xbox Partner Preview program called Blindfire. I'm going to talk a little bit about Blindfire, but first we're going to take care of some business. There's something to be said for the art of making your money work for you. And it's hard to get in the game. There's always like, I don't have a lot of expertise in managing a portfolio, and what does investing do anyway, and all this sort of stuff. It can be a real pain to get going. That's why there's Acorns. Yes, today's episode is sponsored to you in part by Acorns. Acorns makes it easy to start automatically saving and investing for your future. Now, you don't need a lot of money. You don't need a lot of expertise to invest with Acorns. In fact, you can get started with just your spare change. And so that's perfect. You kind of get your feet wet in the game. With some of your pocket change. Just get in there and kind of see how it works and see how you can maybe make a little money in the process. Acorns recommends an expert-built portfolio that fits you and your money goals, and then it automatically invests your money for you. So you can see how all of that goes and just get a sense for like what it all looks like with pocket change, low risk, all that sort of stuff. And, hey, the way this stuff tends to work out is, this pocket change might end up being a little bit more than pocket change by the time you're all done, huh? And so that's kind of nice, when you can kind of get an understanding of how some of this stuff works with a little bit lower risk. And then, maybe if you find yourself in a position to get in the market a little more deeply and a little more expertly, all that sort of stuff, Acorns is right there for you. Head on over to acorns.com/Jeff or download the Acorns app to start saving and investing for your future today. Paid non-client endorsement. Compensation provides incentive to positively promote Acorns. Investing involves risk. Acorn Advisors LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. View important disclosures at acorns.com/Jeff. So Blindfire. This is a game that kind of came out of nowhere. This was announced as part of the Xbox Partner Preview, which they had last Thursday, and they were like, kind of, hey, by the way, this is out now. Blindfire is a shooter. It is early access. It is on Xbox. What they call it? They call it the Game Preview program. And so there's not a ton of content here, but I played some of it, and I think it's got really neat bones. Like, there's something to Blindfire that I think could be a fun little game. So this is a game. It is a game where you are playing a first-person shooter, and it is in the darkness. And so you are in a pitch black room. Well, not pitch black. There are things that emit light in the room. You are in an insanely dark room where you cannot see the opposition, and so you are using a mix of sound and like some echolocation abilities to track down the other enemies and shoot them. it's really neat. Like that aspect of it is really fascinating. Now there are things about it that I think could be done better. It's a weird situation where like, you know, there are obstacles in the environment that do have light on them. And so you'll see some of those obstacles, you'll see little bits and pieces. But like if a character walks in front of those, they don't make a silhouette. They're effectively invisible. Unless they're in a room like in an area of the room that gets more directly lit. And as time runs out, they start lighting up different parts of the arena to kind of make it, you know, like overtime, like, hey, we're going to like finish this up. And so you're kind of listening for all of these footsteps. And then you know, you can hit the space bar. It's on Xbox. I've been playing it on PC, but it is on Xbox as well. But you hit the button for your echo thing, and anything in range that is a target, a human target, will kind of show up for like almost less than a second. You'll see a few frames of them skittering around. And so you have to like act quickly and immediately start shooting in that direction, you know, because you're like, okay, well, as soon as this thing goes dark, I don't know where they are anymore. And so it's a mixture of like listening for the footsteps, trying not to make noise yourself. And so they've got 2 reloads in the game. They got a fast reload and a slow reload. I think with the idea being the slow reload will make a little bit less noise. And yeah, that's kind of it, man. It has a 4v4 mode and a like free-for-all mode. And it only has 2 weapons. There's a pistol and a shotgun, and it seems to randomly pick one of those weapons every time a round starts. And so it is insanely bare bones right now. But there's something about it that I just look at it and go like, man, what if they did this? What if they did this? Like, it just feels like there's a ton of potential to the game that if they, you know, like it's maybe never going to be the tactical, mind-blowing, like billions of people are going to play it, but like it is as like your side game or something. Like there's something about it. You're like, man, this is like, there's a tension to Blindfire. That the darkness brings, and it needs way more maps and just way more content in general and whatever else. But it kind of turns it into sort of a different thing. When players are dead, they get camera control over, you know, different drones and whatever else, and you can activate little objects in the environment. There's a bunch of mannequins holding pistols in the environment, and so you can activate one of those, and it'll shoot the gun twice. It'll just go pop pop, which I don't think that'll ever hurt anybody. Maybe it would. But it's a thing of like, hey, you would then hear the sound of that coming out from over here and go, what the fuck's going on? And it might throw you off your game. So it's like a fun little extra thing that dead players can do, like it was Bomberman or something. I don't know. I look at it and think like, man, what if, you know, hey, what if you had a glow in the dark paint can as your offhand item or something, and so you could kind of like mark the environment or maybe even mark a opposing player or something so they stick out, or just like weird. It just feels like this is a game. If they went full Time Splitters or went full GoldenEye, you know, like if they just said, hey, we're gonna like throw in a billion different weird modes into this that are different riffs on the idea of a game where you can't see. I think that there's a lot of really cool things they could do with it. And if they go in that direction of just making this a dramatically weirder game, like if they go like, hey, we're putting more guns in it, like I don't think that's gonna, like the pistol and the shotgun honestly are kind of enough. Like I think I prefer the pistol because there's more tension involved. The shotgun is a little more like, you saw some shit, you're gonna dump, and then if you guessed right, they're done. You got a guy. But also, you know, you then have to reload that gun, and there's like 8 other people, or, you know, 6 other people in the match potentially that just saw part of that go down. And so you'll see, like, you know, even if you don't see the players, you'll see tracers from the bullets, and so you can kind of get a look and go like, okay, someone is behind that pillar because I see the bullets coming from out behind it shooting at this other player. Maybe I can sneak around behind. There's just like weird, I say tactics, but I don't mean like military milsim I mean like video game ass, I'm going to sneak up behind this motherfucker and do him type tactics. And I think there's something to it. You know, do I think it's going to catch on? Like, I don't know. Like I tried playing it last night and it's been out for less than a week and it took like 2 minutes to find a match. It's, you know, so it's hard for me to like really recommend right now. It's inexpensive. It's under $10. I think it's like 8 or 9. You know, it's not a, you know, they're not charging a ton for it, which helps. But yeah, you know, there's not a ton of content in it right now. There's some weird little netcode stuff here and there, and you know, it's the game is certainly not finished, both from a just polish standpoint and also a content standpoint. And so keep that in mind. But I do think that the basic idea of what they've come up with, I think, is really sound. And if they pursued it in some, if they took some really interesting chances with it in terms of mode design and whatever else, I think they could have something really, really fun. And I'm really curious to see where they take it from here. I also think that there's aspects of it that, like, oh, you know, the sound and footsteps and the directions and stuff, I think are fine. But it almost seems like that they could level up their audio tech a little bit better. Like it's you hear the footsteps coming from a general direction, and you do hear people moving past you, which is really creepy sometimes because you're like, that person's right fucking next to me, and I need to figure this out right now and kill them. And so that stuff works, but I'm still left with the impression that just like it feels like the audio could be a little bit sharper or just like a little bit more directional or a little bit more pinpointy. They could throw some more audio tech at it, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Some 3D sound or something. Maybe there's a little bit more that could be done on that front. But it's a really neat thing. But yeah, I don't think adding an assault rifle or whatever is going to make it any better. Like the pistol has enough shots to take somebody down, but you're going to have to reload it. You have infinite, you know, you're not like running out of ammo, but you do have to reload the gun. And the shotgun is, you know, kind of the more brute force panic weapon, but you don't have both of them. You only have one in each round. And so I don't know. You could add, you know, like I think goofy weapons would be more intriguing here than like, this is the SMG. Like, okay, yeah, sure. It's like a pistol, but it shoots more. I get it. Like things that did more to it. Yeah, mic Hail Rima 3D says, I'd love mic integration. That might be fun, but like no one, you know, like any audio is going to just give you away. So I think people will just turn their mic off. As fun as it might be to be able to like whisper in the dark at people or something, that might be cool. The arenas are all indoors, and so maybe this wouldn't make sense, but Phil Bosch says a fireworks gun. I was thinking like, yeah, what if you could launch flares, you know, and just like light up an area of the room for, you know, a number of seconds or something like that. I think there's like a lot of different things they could do with light emitting objects, you know, like you know, what if you had a flamethrower? You know, you could and what if that flamethrower set different parts of the levels on it? Like it's really easy to like looking at and maybe it's because there's not a lot there, but I think there's aspects of it that I just look at and go like, man, I've got like a million ideas for like stuff you could do in this weird dark environment. Like it feels like such a blank slate that you could do a lot of really fun stuff with, you know, whether it's flashbangs or flares or whatever. I think that there's just a ton of potential for if you really went crazy with lighting also, you know, just the quality of the lighting. And, you know, if you were to ray trace the shit out of it, that might be a bit over the line tech wise, but, you know, like having weapons that emit light and stuff while also, you know, playing around with different modes and different kind of glow in the dark stuff and whatever else. There's a lot of neat potential to Blindfire. And I hope they realize that potential. That is what I came away from it thinking, is like, if they take this in a really fun direction and come up with a lot of really crazy stuff and just turn it into a wild sandbox, and then build reasonably fair modes around that sandbox so you can still rein it in, I think that they'll be on to something. Will that result in massive sales and whatever else? Who can say? Like, I can't, like it's so hard. Like, it's at the end of the day, it's a first person shooter, and so that market is so saturated that when you start to talk about it in terms of like financial success, it gets really, you're like, man, what the fuck? Like, man, that's a rough one. But it is, like, you're not going to confuse it for any of the other first person shooters on the market. It definitely is its own thing. And so, yeah, I don't know. Like, if that sounds interesting to you, I think you should give it a look. But again, it's really hard for me to wholeheartedly recommend at the moment, just because I think it has like 2 maps, maybe. It's got 2 weapons. It's got 2 modes. Like, there's not a ton to it. And so, yeah, I don't know. I hope that as they add more to it, they find some really compelling and crazy stuff to do, because I think that would be a really cool direction for them to go. Webfishing. Webfishing is on Steam. It's like someone sat down and said, let's make there's like an Animal Crossing-esque vibe to it for sure. It's a fishing game. It's a fishing game where you create a server, and I think up to 12 people can connect to a server, and you run around this little world and catch fish. And you're a cute little furry type animal. You can be a cat or a dog, or like you can make the dog look like a fox by changing the tail out if you want. You wear different colored tank tops and shorts and stuff, and you can buy a metal detector and find parts for a watch. There's like weird stuff in there too, but generally speaking, it is a very kind of lo-fi multiplayer fishing game, and they have taken pretty direct inspiration from Animal Crossing in terms of the writing is not as good as Animal Crossing. When you catch a fish, they have a little line about the fish, and it doesn't always rhyme, and you look at it and go like, you're kind of making a joke there, but not really. All right, okay. The fishing is very basic. I guess I should say I'm like level 3, so you do eventually unlock the ability to get different bait and lures, and you upgrade your rod. Like, you're basically, all the fish you catch, you're selling, and then you're using that money to level up your camp, which then in turn unlocks another tier of upgrades for you to buy. And so there's like a lot to buy, not just the cosmetics of like, it's $12 for a new shirt or whatever of your in-game fishing money. And then it's just like, and then you look and it's like 6 cats standing on the edge of a pier fishing, and then they occasionally pull out gigantic sharks and stuff. And you're like, what? Whoa. And people are just chatting and cursing at each other. I don't know. The servers I were on were people being very crude. It was not a cozy time. It was people using words like based, and me shaking my head and going, these people. It's like it's 20 years ago with these people. None of you are Lil B. But it's you can just start your own server locally. You're not downloading dedicated server software or anything nuts like that. And so it's this kind of like, it's kind of a cozy game, and it's the fishing is very basic. You're casting your rod out when it gets when you hit a button, or when a fish hits your line, you hit the button and a little meter pops up, and you just kind of hold the button down. Occasionally you have to mash the mouse button to drag a fish all the way in, but it's nothing too stressful. At least it hasn't been so far. That might be something that changes at higher levels, but Yeah, it seems like a game that's got some weird secrets. Like it feels like a larger space than it initially seems. And so maybe as you explore, you find other stuff. Like I said, you can. I found a shop that sells a metal detector and also sells a watch, but it's like you need to find 3 watch fragments before you can build this watch. So I assume you must take the metal detector and go find the watch pieces and then come back and you can build a watch. But yeah, I don't know. There's other weirder stuff you find as you go, and some of these stuff has stats on it. There's like a drink machine where you can buy this beverage, and then for 5 minutes your fishing rate, your catch rate will be up 15% or whatever it is. And so there's weird little upgrades like that, and it's just a cool little thing. I don't know. It's just a silly little thing that I'm sure has some stuff hidden around the edges. How much is there? I don't know, because I'm still relatively early on in it, but it's a game that can be kind of cozy and is kind of silly, and it's a fishing game without being some, it's not Sega Bass Fishing. It's not, you're not jerking your rod around in this thing. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? And so you also have a dive. You have a double jump. It's like you jump once, and then the second time you press it, you kind of dive forward, and so you can do these running dives because you can't swim. And so sometimes there's like rocks in the water, and so you kind of have to like very carefully try to jump your way across on these rocks. And you can kind of do this silly dive. There's also big mushrooms that you hit, and they bounce you high in the air and fling you across the island. There's stuff. There's stuff in this game. How much stuff? I'm not sure. But it seems like a game that is significantly more than just like stand here and catch fish. Though the standing there and catching fish and chatting with people is certainly a significant part of it. There were a ton of servers running when I was playing it last night that were like mostly full. And so it was easy to get on a server that had like 11 or 10 other people on it if you just want to go hang out with strangers and do fishing stuff. Or it's got lobby codes that you can share with friends, and you can create private you can do all that stuff if you just want to play with your friends as well. Web fishing is cool. It's not, I don't know that I would call it relaxing, but it does have that vibe. It is something that is at least attempting to be relaxing. I don't know that I was relaxed. There's something about being on a server with other players that to me is the antithesis of relaxing. Especially when they're using when everyone's just cursing at each other. That's fun. Whatever. I'm not like, I can't believe these damn kids were using their curse words on the fishing game. Whatever. But it wasn't something that I necessarily found like cozy per se. You should give it a look. You should at least look at the Steam page for web fishing and go, like I did. And maybe you will find yourself saying, I'm going to go get this. I'm going to go get my hands on this. Because it's pretty cool. Next up, let's talk about Sonic Shadow Generations. I don't have much to say about it, but let's take a break here, and we'll come back and we'll talk about Shadow the Hedgehog. Body data. It's time to know more about your body. They always say listen to your body, and honestly, I don't know. I'm so terrible at that. The whole art of like, well, I'm creaking here. I guess we're gonna take artillery. I feel it in my lip. Like none of that stuff works for me. I need numbers. I need stats. I need to know, am I charisma 16 today or charisma 17? What's going on? I want numbers, baby. And so, in the pursuit of that sort of data, there are all sorts of different ways to get your hands on different pieces of data. But what about your metabolism? It's your body's engine. Your metabolism. It's how your body turns the food you eat into the fuel that keeps you going. How do you measure that? You do it with Lumen. All you have to do is breathe into your Lumen first thing in the morning, and you'll know what's going on with your metabolism. Are you burning fats or carbs? Then Lumen will give you a personalized nutrition plan for that day based on your measurements. You can also like breathe into it before or after like a workout or a meal, so you know kind of what's going on in your body in real time. And Lumen will give you tips to keep you on top of your health game. It's cool. Just to even if you're not going to act on it, even if you're just going to look at the numbers and go, huh, all right. It's interesting to know what the heck your body is doing, man. Because I don't know. What? Like, I go to sleep, I wake up, like, what is happening? Did I sleep? I think so. I don't remember that time. What happened? Is my body turning food? How is my body turning food into fuel? It doesn't make any sense. That's why the Lumen is here. To help me make sense of it all. And that's nice. So if you want to take the next step in improving your health, go to lumen.me/JeffG to get 15% off your Lumen. That is LUMEN.me/JeffG for 15% off your purchase. And thanks to Lumen for sponsoring the episode. Black Doom! I'm never going to understand Shadow the Hedgehog. There's never going to be a time where Shadow the Hedgehog is going to make sense for me or click for me. I think I just have to accept that. I was looking at some of the coverage of Sonic Cross Shadow Generations. Are we pronouncing, is this like Hunter x Hunter where we don't pronounce the X? Because Sonic Shadow Generations is a terrible fucking name. Sonic Cross Shadow Generations. Like, it's one of those things you look at and it makes sense when you look at the words, because we've all just come to accept the cross in the middle of these titles. What was the first? Was it the Namco, like Namco Cross Capcom or something? Was that the first one of these? And then when everyone does collabs on songs, they just started using the cross thing, and it's just like, it's better than when we used the terms versus, when people were remixing songs and said like it's versus the person who remixes it, which, because it's an adversarial thing. Like I don't like that. Anyway, Sonic Cross Shadow Generations is one part a remake of Sonic Generations, a piece of shit garbage game for idiots. And then a new Shadow the Hedgehog campaign that they have inserted into this thing. I went and, so I've been playing this off and on here and checking some of this game out now for a week or whatever. And, just little bits and pieces. And just like every time I pick up the controller, I'm like, what am I doing with my life? Like, why am I? Okay, fine. And then, the reviews hit yesterday, and, I spent a little time. I was like, what are people seeing in this game? I saw, scores all over the place. Some people were like, this is incredible, and I saw, I think it was Eurogamer that was like, hey, Sonic Generations has aged really poorly. Like, it was, the reviewer was like, I liked it when I was a kid, but Jesus Christ, this game is hard to come, I'm paraphrasing. And then said, but the Shadow campaign is really excellent. And that's where I'm just like, what? You fucking ride rails? Like, I played a level of it in front of my son, and he was really impressed. He's 3. Because it's Shadow jumping around and spinning and doing all this loops, and then occasionally you jump and hit the button, and occasionally you have to hit one button, occasionally you have to hit the other one. Occasionally you jump, occasionally you do a homing attack, and then you're just back on the roller coaster, and you're like, all right. And I don't think it looks like okay, like if you're into that aesthetic, I guess, man, but like I just look at the whole thing and go, I don't think any of this looks particularly great. I think a lot of the art style and some of the stuff around it is kind of dumb. Especially all the stuff they set up with like, so the story they're telling here is like Shadow the Hedgehog is up on his space station or whatever the fuck. And all the other Sonic characters are having a birthday party, but then Black Doom comes back and fucks with his day and sucks everybody into a vortex. I don't know. And there are aspects of it you look at and go like, oh, okay, I don't know, like that's aesthetically busy, at least. But like, why the fuck would you want to do this? Like, I literally, like, I'm having trouble understanding why a person would play this, or rather, how a person could come away from it going, yeah, that was cool. Like the interaction, the level of interaction you have on all of this stuff is fucking terrible. You're just like, okay, yeah, I don't know. I jumped from one rail to the other, and then it was happening all fast for a little while, and then I got to do 2 more things. It's like practically a Laserdisc game at some point with the number of decisions you make. And it just like, yeah, it's still that. Like, I'm not saying that it's a bad game. I'm saying I will never understand. It is impossible for me to understand why people would like this style of game. Whether it is Sonic, whether it is Shadow, like whatever. I'm just like, dude, this feels like it is barely a goddamn game. Because you are just watching him do and watching him do loop-de-loops on the little rails and watching him do it's not that engaging either. So I just look at it and go like, all right, man. Sure. I guess, dude. I guess. Like if this is what gets you going, then you know, sure. But no part of this, like as a like interactive object, is something that I can find compelling in the least. And I've tried multiple times. I've tried, you know, like every time it comes out, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna, if not, you know, and I'm not gonna sit here and say like, I try it with an open, like, you know, but I try and like understand what is it that people see in this shit. And the original Sonic the Hedgehog, I don't think is a great game. I think that Shadow the Hedgehog is a really silly concept, and I love the idea of it's Black Sonic and he's got a gun. And you're like, yes, okay, fine, yes. Let that motherfucker dump. Shoot all these tanks, whatever the fuck it is he's doing. Fine. Like conceptually, Shadow the Hedgehog is for me because Shadow is an edgy dude. And you know what? So am I. But like, man, what the fuck? From just a gameplay perspective and all of that stuff, I just it all falls apart for me. But I would say that about most Sonic games as well. Like Sonic Frontiers, I thought actually was like kind of cool because in a weird way, because it at least had something else going on in it, you know? And yeah, at least that's, you know, fun in its own weird way. But this stuff, these like 3D Sonic games where you're just like, hey, did you want to aim at those enemies? Don't bother. You've got a homing attack. It's fine. Just press it at the right time to go boop, boop, boop. And then you're bouncing from this. And then you launched off this thing and you bounced off 3 bumpers. And then you're back on this thing and you're theoretically playing again. But like, I don't know, man. Hold down the boost button. Keep boosting. Because the timer's running. Oh, you got an S rank. Nice work. You held down the boost button better than some people did, I guess. Congratulations. So yeah, I don't want to begrudge the people that enjoy this stuff, but also you people are sick and you've been sick for a long time, and someone needs to tell you that. Someone needs to be brave enough to say, hey, listen, it's not okay. Yeah, no, I don't know. I am, you know, partially joking, I suppose, but for real, it's hard for me to understand why people would enjoy this, as a video game. If you like the characters, if you think it's flashy and fun, and you're like, look at all this crazy stuff, and you just like seeing shit happen on a screen. Might I recommend screensavers? You should go download Milk Drop, and you should listen to some music maybe. Like that looks cool too. I think it looks cooler than anything in any of the Sonic games, but but hey, you do you. I just, yeah, there's it's beyond me, I guess. It's too much. I'll never understand. It's just too good. But yeah, it's they made another Sonic game. I guess is the thing I could say about my time with Sonic Cross Shadow Generations. Is just like, yeah. All right, guys. Cool. You it goes fast. Shadow also goes pretty fast. You can hit that boost button and he'll go. He'll go fast. And he'll grab a thing and he'll ride it up and then jump back on the rail and then, it's just, yeah, whatever, man. Fucking whatever. Those are my thoughts on Sonic Cross Shadow Generations. Check it out. They made another game like that. And if you like another game like that, then this is more of that because the Shadow stuff is new. And I have seen people who claim to like that sort of thing say that they think that the Shadow thing is well made. Sure, dude. Sure. Whatever you say. Let's get into the news. Microsoft held a live stream last Thursday. It was they called it a partner preview. Short little thing. They just kind of got out there and announced some third-party stuff. Opened and closed it with a couple of Remedy projects. This is where the second part of the Alan Wake 2 DLC was shown, the Lake House, and that is out today. Along with a big anniversary update that I guess adds a ton of like the quality, you can call them quality of life features, but also is like stuff that's, cheat code style accessibility stuff like infinite ammo and a few other things like that, that, might be a cool way to just kind of blast through the game. Especially, I guess, if you weren't really feeling the combat or whatever, like the ability to kind of tweak a lot of that stuff really dramatically might be cool for the main game as well. The Lake House DLC it looks cool. I haven't had time to I got to reinstall Alan Wake 2. So I've changed PCs since then and I don't have the game installed anymore. I should reinstall that thing and check this stuff out. Blindfire was announced and immediately released there. We talked about that earlier. A little bit more of Like a Dragon pirate Yakuza in Hawaii, which is a mouthful of a name. And it just looks outstanding. They're going to make a pirate Yakuza game. They're going to say, fuck it, we can do boat combat better than Assassin's Creed can. It's just like this very crazy. Yeah. It's great. It's great that team has found a level of success. Like, because there's levels to it, right? They've found a level of success that doesn't result in them being forced to crank the thing out over and over again. They found a level of success and earned a level of freedom that lets them play with it. That lets them come up with crazier and crazier ideas for like, okay, well now we're gonna have this wild different setting and we're gonna tell a story this way. And when the zombie stuff was coming out at the time, it was maybe seen as a little weird. But I think now in the context of like, hey, now we've got a pirate game and now this other stuff, you're like, you guys are nuts, man. Like it is some of the best things happening in video games, and they're willing to play with it in such a wild way, like a loving way, a trusting way. They trust the fan base to come with them on these weirder and weirder adventures. And they earn that trust because they've been knocking it out of the fucking park. And that's great. The game is shipping a week earlier than they initially announced, which means it will be out February 21st on Xbox and PC is what it says here. And good on them, man. Like I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I have played every single game in the franchise and every single game in the series, because honestly, who has the time? They're putting out one of these goddamn things a year. They need to. The Virtua Fighter game needs to just happen. I mean, supposedly it is. I mean, supposedly there is a Virtua Fighter in development. I think someone at Sega said as much. If it wasn't a leak, but anyway. It's becoming one of those poorly kept secrets, or at least it was at one point, assuming it is still a running project. But like, man, it'd be cool to see. I wonder if they would just stuff it full of characters from. That would be a weird fit in some cases. But anyway, Mouse PI for Hire was shown here. That's the kind of cartoony styled. First person, not quite Mickey Mouse, but you know what I mean. Subnautica 2 was shown here. That game is going to come into early access in 2025, and I think will be in early access for quite a while, is my understanding of it. Animal Well, which has been out on other platforms, launched on Xbox. They went ahead and announced that and released it here. Eden Zero, Eternal Strands, Mistfall Hunter, Wheel World, which is the new Messhoff game, I believe. They renamed it from like Ghost Bike, Ghost Rider, or whatever it was. And it looks different from their other games for sure. They also the other Remedy project here, the multiplayer, the co-op multiplayer game was shown here and announced here formally. It is called FBC Firebreak. That is what that is, Federal Bureau of Control, and it sounds like you'll be returning to, if not the exact locations, because of the way that building works, areas inspired by sections of Control, but you'll be doing kind of a 3-player co-op thing as you mow down the hiss, I guess. They're going to put that out next year on Xbox and PC. I'm intrigued. Hey, the Control is one of the best games to come out over the last. I guess I need to keep extending this number. I was going to say 5 years, and I think that's still technically correct. Well, let's just say 6. I think I've just Control is an amazing universe. Control ended up actually, like, I think Control and the quality of the storytelling and the world and everything there, I think that game made me much more open to enjoying Alan Wake 2 as someone who didn't really like Alan Wake 1 very much and didn't really have an attachment to that character. Control is so good that now I want to see as much of that world as I can. And so, like it led me to play a lot more Alan Wake 2 and or led me to kind of get into Alan Wake 2. I think Alan Wake 2 works on its own for sure. It's probably the best game that came out last. It's up there. FBC Firebreak, more stories, more things in that world. I'm all for it. And so it'll be interesting to see what they do with it. I think they've gone on record as saying, like, it's not a live service game, but we are going to add stuff to it post-release, which the difference between those two things is maybe kind of a weird thing. But anyway, a 3-player co-op game where you go through and fuck things up in the oldest house, I think is really cool. I hope that the characters are, like, well, it's kind of a weird thing. Like, are these characters going to have a bunch of abilities, or, is it more straightforward, all that sort of stuff? Like, the trailer's pretty good at it, kind of leading you to getting you into that world a little bit. Anyway, yeah, so they had their event, and they had a couple of big hits and some more indie stuff there at the Xbox partner preview. Nintendo, they went ahead and preloaded the client for their mysterious playtest game. If you remember, they took like, I think it was a 10,000 sign, like not a ton of signups for a mystery thing. And they said, you need to have an online account and you need to have the expansion pass to sign up for this. And then we will choose like first come, first serve, type stuff for who gets into this. They have gone ahead and preloaded a client for this that I think is, it's like a couple of gigs. And people, I don't think the playtest actually starts until it's later this week. It's like Thursday. The playtest will actually begin. So no one has played it yet, but because they put the client onto a bunch of people's Switches, people have, of course, gotten their hands on it and pulled it apart and data mined it and done all of that. Like someone ripped every track out of it, every song, and posted that somewhere. So like if you want to go listen to the soundtrack for this, you can do that. I've seen multiple people reference the KK Slider in reference to the soundtrack. I have not heard any of it myself. But I guess as people pull it apart, they're finding images for the tutorial and they're finding some of the dialogue that the game is giving you and little bits and pieces of what this thing is. And it sounds like it is a big kind of shared world multiplayer game where you are crafting and building things, that you'll be able to maybe build your own custom models and also kind of build these full biomes with other players or something as you kind of fill in the world. It seems like a very Nintendo-like approach to like a Minecraft or like something where, like a crafting style game. Maybe not necessarily a survival type game, but I think some of that remains to be seen. But the game talks about a bunch of different, like some of these details talk about things like the dev core, where you go and that's your social hub for interacting with other players and all of that. And then you can head out into the world and build. And there's a 20 question test that you have to complete before it will let you build things, because they know that people will just build giant dicks or whatever. They've pulled out a code name out of it. It seems to be codenamed Rockstock. They have, from the data mining, again, this is supposedly from the data mining. I have not necessarily ripped apart an executable myself or anything nefarious like that, but this is the word going around, is that this is from EPD4, which is the Nintendo team responsible for things like Labo, and responsible for things like Switch Sports and 1-2 Switch and the Ring Fit stuff. As well as Alarmo was apparently something that happened out of that team. Game Builder Garage, those sorts of things. So I think when you take it in terms like that and look at what EPD4 has done, and also look at I'm going to call it up here real quick here. The head of that group, who is a man named Koichi Kawamoto, like he's credited. He is the guy who invented the thing that all of WarioWare came from. Like he worked on the micro games that were hidden inside of Mario Artist. Is it Talent Studio or is it Polygon Studio that has that stuff? I forget which, but it's Polygon Studio. It's Polygon Studio that has that stuff. So the 64DD, the disk drive add-on for the N64, actually has, like, very directly has, like, micro games in it as a hidden as a mode in that game. It's not even the main course, but it is the thing that then was iterated on for all of the WarioWare games. I don't think he worked on the WarioWare games per se, but he's credited on all of them because he kind of coalesced this initial concept that they worked from. And so his name is on a bunch of, it's like his name is on the Street Pass games, it's on Brain Training, it's on Ring Fit, the Labo stuff, Metopia. So like all of the weird shit that Nintendo does. All of the stuff that comes out of kind of nowhere, and you're like, here's this little toy-like thing that feels like nothing you've ever seen before, and sometimes that stuff works really well, and sometimes that stuff just seems like Nintendo's weird way of trying to make this other thing. And so like all the Me Plaza stuff, like he's the director of the Me Maker software, I guess. So like, you know, he's running EPD4, and EPD4 themselves as a team has been responsible for, like I said, Labo, that jump rope challenge thing for Switch that came out. So like they seem like in between that and Labo and Game Builder Garage, EPD4 seems like that they are responsible for some of the most experimental stuff that Nintendo has been doing for the last 15, 20 years, I guess I would say. And so whatever Rockstock is, like what is leaked out of it so far aligns, I think, very directly with like, oh, okay, here's the really wild, crazy part of Nintendo doing something else that's wild, and you know, and so I don't know. Part of it reminded me of oh man, that PlayStation game that came and went and then came back again because the developers got their hands back on it again. The First Children, the Last Children, the First Descendant. No, the Tomorrow Children. Is that yes, the Tomorrow Children. There, I stumbled my way into it. Like some of the ways that this is being described, kind of reminds me a little bit of that it feels like more like a social experiment on Nintendo's part or something. And we'll see what this ends up being. Obviously, they have said that anyone who signs up for this should keep it a secret if they are selected. No one's going to do that. So you know, and they've already, like I said, they've already pulled that thing apart and looked for every string of text they could find and found this idea of like, you plop a beacon down and that's going to cover an area of the world, and then you build inside your beacon's range, and you know, like I don't know. We'll see what it ends up being. You're going to have to farm resources to build things, and so it feels like you're going to do a bunch of hunter-gatherer type stuff. I don't, you know, we'll see. It's about players working together, and we'll see if there's, you know, any sort of competitive aspect to it, or if it is really more of a pure kind of thing. I think this is cool. I don't know. Like I've the reaction to this information has been really weird. For a couple of reasons. There were people who were convinced that this was going to be GameCube emulation on the Switch, and they're somehow bummed out. And I was like, what? You don't got other ways to play those games? What do you, who cares? Like, yeah, sure, that'd be cool if they did that. But the idea of like, oh man, I can't believe it. Like, what? Who cares, man? They're probably not going to do it. It just feels like a very unserious reaction to be like, I don't know, whatever. But like also that people are like just kind of shitting on the core idea of it. I don't know, man. Like I would really like to see Nintendo's take on a big scale multiplayer game, because Nintendo has such a particular set of restrictions and rules and codes of the way that they view the world and the way they view online connectivity and all of that stuff. And they can be so weird about that stuff at times. I mean, think about friend codes, you know, like think about the way Nintendo has approached all of that. I really want to see what it is they're doing, because it's, you know, hey, it's a big something different. The other thing people always want out of Nintendo is something different and new, or at least they say that, and then they get bummed when a new Zelda doesn't get announced or whatever, right? I mean, it's the double-edged sword of everyone just wants another Zelda, another Mario, another Metroid, another Ice Climber. You understand. But Yeah, I don't know. I'll be really. I'm gonna keep an eye out for this because I really want to see what the heck it is that they're doing. You could argue that like something about this concept feels very late to the party. Of just like, oh yeah, you're gonna make a game like this, huh? Like, okay, there's like everyone made one of these already. There's, you know, what am I gonna do? Stick in a rock and go? You know, like, hey, sure, I guess. But I want to see what they end up doing, because they haven't really approached this kind of concept before. And like I said, Nintendo's restrictions and concepts and methods for addressing online gaming are so deliberately paced and so very specific to their, some may argue, narrow view of the internet, that I am very curious to see how they end up pulling this off and what they end up doing. And when it ends up coming out. I mean, you know, like, is this a play test for netcode purposes? Like, is this something that's right around the corner? Is this going to be the last big Switch game that they ship before the Switch 2 comes out? Is this a, you know, cross-generational thing? Because, you know, we're kind of, in theory here, we're getting down to it in terms of the original Switch. And so we'll see what happens. I don't know. Like, this is I'm happy to, like, I'm happy that this is something super left field and not just like, what if we did 5 swords adventures? You know, like, I like that they're gonna do something fucking weird. We'll see how that goes. Bungie is starting to integrate more of its people into Sony's into a central team at Sony. This is something that in the last round of layoffs they noted was going to happen, and now it appears it is happening. There have been a number of people, Bungie people, kind of on social media, or in this case LinkedIn, kind of saying like, hey, this is my last day at Bungie because now I'm part of PlayStation. This is something that thegamepost.com has been collecting, I guess I would say, for the past couple of days here as some of this stuff has been happening. There's been, let's see, we have a post here from Bridget O'Neill on LinkedIn. It says, today's my team's last day at Bungie, but not our last day working on Destiny and Marathon. Bungie Creative Studios is joining PlayStation Studios to build the foundation for a creative team that can support all PlayStation Live service games. As part of this move, I'm taking on a new role as Senior Director of Creative at PlayStation Studios. And then, you know, goes on to say that working on Destiny has been a dream, and, you know, like all of that sort of stuff. Live service is hard and comes with a unique set of challenges. So with PlayStation and Bungie working together, we'll be able to give a huge jumpstart on development for new games as they enter this super competitive market, is what she says here. And yeah, there's been other folks that have made this jump as well and have updated their, whether it's updating their LinkedIn or just kind of like posting somewhere online saying, hey, you know, now I'm in this centralized role. This is, you know, probably the right thing to do from like central teams that can support multiple teams is not the worst idea in the world. It is, you know, it is something that can be very helpful, especially if the company is really going to try to kickstart multiple, you know, or try to jumpstart, I guess I should say, for clarity. They're not launching Kickstarters. Thanks to Kickstarter for ruining another word of the English language. If they're going to try and get these games going and try to make them go, like, you know, there's going to be learnings, there's going to be centralized things that, you know, games need. And, you know, a game like Destiny that is already kind of 10 years in and is going to kind of hit this like post major update cadence, you might not need a huge creative team in the mix there. You will need some of their support some of the time, but the rest of the time they could be supporting other things. And Marathon might not take up all of that time either. So the idea of centralizing this team probably makes sense on some org chart somewhere. The thing I'll say is that you don't mess with teams when things are going well, right? If you buy a thing and it continues to do well, you don't touch it. You leave it be. You ask them, hey, what do you need to do it better? What do you need to do it more? And maybe give them some additional resources so that they can continue to grow and you know, do the right moves or whatever. But if a team is not getting it done the way that you need to, that's when you start getting in there and changing it. That's when you get in there and start meddling with the thing you bought. And I don't know, man. It feels like Bungie has been straight up meddled with. And also, you know, Destiny 2 is not really done as well as it was, right? You know, it hit some very rough patches at a very inopportune time. And maybe part of that inopportune time is why Bungie sold to Sony in the first place. But Sony's been very quick to kind of get in here and start monkeying around with it, whether it's layoffs or now, you know, generating this central team. Again, you know, like these people have probably a great deal of experience of working on this style of game and the cadence and demands of games that have these, you know, these sorts of constant updates and stuff. So the idea of being able to have like central people, seasoned central people that can say, no, you're not going to get it done unless you hire this person. You know, like, we can handle this part, but you're going to need 20 more people here. You're going to need this, or even if it's just recommendations on a resourcing thing might help as well. But, you know, they'll be in creative positions, which I don't know, you know, like creative is such a weird, you know, term here. Director of creative at PlayStation Studios, as opposed to like Bungie Creative Studios, but like a creative services division might mean something as simple as like, we generated some art, we did a logo here, we've generated all of the assets for, you know, hey, you need new backgrounds for your player cards, like our team makes that, our team does this, we're gonna, you know, like those sorts of artistic moves. Or is this straight up like creative, like you're in there writing stories, you're in there, you know, like creating those parts of the games as well? I that's not immediately clear from this. Like it's art directors and stuff like that seem to be making the jump. So my inclination is that it's the former of just like, hey, we're gonna handle like asset generation and, you know, like, hey, if you need art, if you need cool art for your game, we're gonna be the cool art people for this game, this game, this game, and this game. Like, we're going to make skins for this. We're going to do this. And, you know, like if you need a gun to look like it's all glitched out and crazy, come to us because we're making gun skins, baby. I don't know if it's something like that or if it's a larger kind of creative role. But like, again, looking at some of the other folks, marketing art director, marketing art director moving over as part of this. That sounds like more of like, okay, like you're not even necessarily generating in-game content in some of those cases. You're generating some of that other stuff. But like the CTO of Bungie made the move over here. A managing director named Jeremy Rich also made the move over to a central role. But also that's kind of a different, those seem like different jobs. It's not necessarily all as part of this creative team. Luis Villegas was at Bungie for 14 years, again, according to thegamepost.com. And he made the move. He was the CTO there, and now he is the CTO for the content vertical at PlayStation as the head of technology, creative, and services. So that's a similar role in some cases, but yeah. It's hard to, you know, get a real sense for this without, you know, knowing exactly how Sony is structuring all of these centralized services. But at the same time, well, you know, central services in my experience, and, you know, like it's a different thing for me because it's like, hey, we need a logo. I'm like, okay. And you're fitting it into someone's calendar who has to make 20 other things over the next couple of weeks, and you're like, oh, okay, so we're gonna have to wait a while for this thing. Oh, we're the lowest priority thing on the list because all the other things are ad related. Okay, so for us in that specific situation, it was, you know, centralized services were oftentimes frustrating because, you know, it was stuff that you wanted a little bit faster than you could get. But if a central service team is resourced properly and you know and is incentivized to motivated to help all of these different brands. I think that's a structure that can definitely work. But in my experience, it was not as awesome. Like, it was a lot of end arounds. It was a lot like, hey, I know if I like go to your manager and say, hey, we have a formal request, this is going to take forever, but this is what I need. What do you think about? And so you're like cutting weird side deals with people to get things done. And that's dumb too. Shouldn't have to do that. I never should have had to do that. None of us should have. Anyway. Former PlayStation executive Sean Layden was out there at Gamescom Asia talking about games. He's got an interesting, I think this is an interesting take, and I think it's like it's in some ways it feels like maybe a dated take. But the pull quote here from gamesindustry.biz, who was there to cover this, is that AA is gone, and that's a threat to the ecosystem going forward. And that relying on blockbusters is a death sentence, basically. And so, hey, look. Yeah. But it says, okay, in the past, we spent a lot more time looking at games and not asking, what's your monetization scheme? Or what's your recurrent revenue plan? Or what's your subscription formula? We ask the simple question, is it fun? Are we having a good time? If you said yes to those questions, you'd usually get a green light. Maybe that was Sean Layden's experience at PlayStation, which he was there for a good long time before he became the chairman of, what is it, Worldwide Studios or whatever it was. That's a very ideal, like, you love to hear that. You love, like, yeah, man. And it's a very good talking point for people who love to, like, have their pitchforks out for current industry stuff. But this has been a business for a real long time. And yeah, there's definitely an aspect of it years and years ago that's been like, oh, we want to make fun games and we think that that'll work or whatever. But like the idea that you could just market anything to mass sales as long as it's good, that concept has been dead a lot longer than AA games. The industry changed dramatically long before that sort of stuff happened. And the industry has only become more and more buttoned up and more data driven over the last, let's call it, what? Okay. I always look at the calendar and go, okay, it's 2024. Let's call it 15 years. Let's call it 15 years, if not 20. But Sony themselves, and forget, the company that brought you Call of Duty and nothing else, like think about the length of time we're talking about here. In terms of how games get green lit and all of that, like, yeah, sure. Maybe when Eugene Jarvis was coming up with crazy ideas and he said, like, I don't know, man, this is the last human family and these robots are fucked. And like, that sounds fun. Make it, and Robotron was born, but it's not quite like that anymore. And I would argue that it hasn't been that way in a long time. So for him to be like not that far removed, he's still doing consulting roles and all that other stuff. I think for him to be in this spot where he's saying like, man, back in the day, it's like, is it fun? Like, dude, you oversaw a Sony that was a very data-driven company. Don't act like you were not. I will argue that things have taken a turn for sure, but also, when we think about the AA games and the kind of that middle tier of game that I love to romanticize, because I do agree that like those games are gone, and like that style of game is gone. The thing that when I romanticize that and when I talk about it, the thing that I get to do to my benefit is people send me games all the time. Those games come out and they're still full price, and they're still just as full price as the AAA big budget games. And you get them, and sometimes they're great, and sometimes you feel like, oh man, I'd fucking bought Gravity Games Street Vert Dirt. What the fuck did I do? You know, like you end up with some stinkers along the way there. Not to say that there are no bad games now, but it was not as clean cut as like, man, they used to make games that were not as risky. It's like, yeah, they did. And they were smaller budgets and all this other stuff, but all those publishers still charged full price for the overwhelming majority of them. And so like the value proposition on that is like kind of fucked in the end of the, you know, because consumers aren't getting a break on that. Consumers aren't going like, well, it's cool that this game didn't look as good as the big budget games and didn't, you know, was not as long as or as engaging as some of these other games, but at least I only paid $30 for it. Like that was a rarity. The game that wasn't full price was a rarity. And it used to happen, you know, like several generations ago. But you did hit a point where at some point, I want to say it was Microsoft with the Xbox 360. But you know, this is not something that I don't think Sony would have necessarily opposed this either. But there was a certain mentality of we need to stop letting people sell games for less than $60 because it is undercutting the $60. Like we need to like all just charge this for games, and we need to all move on and make sure that you know that the idea of the budget game or the $30 game, the $40 game is not happening as much. And yeah, you know, on PC prices are all over the place and it's great. The other thing I'll say is that a lower price point does not guarantee that it's going to sell well or you know more copies or whatever. So I get what he's saying. I respect what he's saying for sure, because I do agree that like that mid-tier game is kind of gone and video games are missing something as a result. But I also think it's really hard to, you know, you can't put the toothpaste back in the fucking tube, right? Like it or not, we've all death marched down this road together. Consumers, publishers, developers, console buyers, like all of us have walked down this road of creating these expectations of what these $70 games look like and what our expectations are for what we get out of them. If you were to suddenly say, guys, we're making these games and they're going to look worse and they're going to be shorter and AA games are back. This one is $70. That's a problem. That's a problem. And I think the like large, you know, consumer base would not be down with that. I think you're always going to have pockets of people because you see people say, I want my games to be shorter and look less good, and I'm not joking. You know, like people love to meme it up about it. And I think you would have people that would love to have shorter, more finishable experiences and more reasonably scoped games. And, you know, like people enjoy a tight experience. But people also want that tight experience to look good. They want it to look like, you know, they want it to run here. They want it, you know, they may not care about 60 frames per second the way that, you know, you think they should or whatever. But I think at a mainstream level, if games started noticeably being shorter and looking worse and having less to them, if they were less engaging for one reason or another, I think consumers would just buy fewer games overall. I think they'd be like, oh man, I bought this and it kind of sucked. Or I bought this and played it for a couple of days and that's that, I guess, huh? It was all right. I don't know. Especially in a world where we have Game Pass and PlayStation Plus and Steam Next. Like, you are inundated with opportunities to play games non-fucking stop. Whether they are free-to-play games, whether they're demos, whether they're games you're getting as part of a subscription service. Like, the ability for you to just play games and the value you can get out of those games, it doesn't leave a lot of room for this idea of like, we've got to bring back these slightly less risky AA game. Like, it's really tough. I think that's just a really tough bridge to recross. You can't roll it back. Unfortunately, you know, I might say, because I tend to agree. Like, it'd be cool if the game industry hadn't fucked this all up. But it's too late now. And the games that fill that AA space, it's Fortnite, it's Minecraft, it's Roblox. You know, it is all of these games that you could just play every day for the rest of your life if you wanted to. You know, that time is filled. It's not like people are like, oh, where are the games? No one is sitting there going like, how come there are no games? At least not in a serious conversation. You might occasionally say the PlayStation 5 does not have as many big budget exclusives as I want, and you may shorten that to say the PlayStation 5 has no games, which is nonsense. But to address that, yes, people do occasionally say that, but like, look around you, man. There are way more games coming out constantly than you could ever possibly deal with. The AA, you know, whether it's the kind of free-to-play stuff that's taking up and consuming a lot of those players' time, or it is as the indie games get bigger and better and larger in scope, in some cases that can be scary for developers that might not have the cushion of a major corporation. As those games kind of grow in size, to get your AAA games, which is still a terrible term, but it's too messy now. I think it's too messy for us to go back, and I do think that there are things that could be done. There are corners that could be cut, right? Like you could find a way, you know, again, not to just go back to it over and over again, but I think that when you have a situation where you're looking at, say, a Spider-Man 2, which is in the news again this week, and we look at some of the things that kind of leaked out of Sony around that, and some of the conversations they seemed to be having internally about the cost of that game and what they could do going forward to not spend all that damn money. It is stuff like, what if we had shorter cutscenes? What if we did this? What if we had fewer cutscenes? You know, and looking at little ways like that I think you probably could do. There's efficiency out there, and I don't mean efficiency in the cold-blooded lay a bunch of people off and let computers do the work kind of way. I do think that there are probably better and smoother ways to make some games. But at the end of the day, this is still a creative form. And you're still going to have to fucking like walk around and fucking get your feet in the dirt and kick around for a while and go like, well, I don't know, what if we did this? What if we did it? You're going to have to get out there in the weeds and fuck around for a while to hit the next big thing. If you're just sitting down going like, what's the big trend right now? We're going to make one of those. Okay, cool. You're not going to be as big as the other thing that did it, more than likely. So I don't know. It's a weird space, and I think some of the stuff, you know, and so this was a conversation that Sean Layden was having with Gordon Van Dyke, who's the co-founder and chief publishing officer of Raw Fury, which, you know, they're a publisher that publishes smaller games that are still not the smallest things in the world, but, you know, games that you might think of as like these higher budget indies and stuff in some cases. So Van Dyke does ask, like, can we find solace in indies? And can they be seen as a beacon of hope when it comes to thinking about creativity first and monetization second? Is the way that, again, gamesindustry.biz has this story. Check it out. It's the way that they are framing the question. Layden's response, according to this article, is, I think you're right. You know, we've seen the same phenomenon in the film industry, right? We've come across to a place where everything is blockbuster, Marvel Cinematic Universe, or it's Sundance Award contender. And then in the center, that middle piece, which used to be Tom Hanks and Meryl Streep in Vermont, you can make that movie. People went to the theaters to see it, but those movies and that kind of content found a place to go. It went to Netflix, it went to Amazon, and went to Apple. All the different streaming services had a place to go. In the gaming business, you have Call of Duty, Grand Theft Auto, indie stuff, but then that middle piece, that middle layer where Interplay, Gremlin, Ocean, THQ, all those companies made their money, that middle piece is gone. If you can become AAA, you survive, or if you could do something interesting in the indie space, you could, but AA is gone. I think that's a threat to the ecosystem, if you will. So I'm looking at indie stuff. With the advent of technologies like the latest Unreal Engine or what Unity can give you, I think we can all say that the standard quality of video games is pretty high now compared to 10 years ago. And so, you know, I think, you know, he's getting to the right conclusions, even if I think that some of the math and as he shows his work, I think some of that stuff is a little bumpy. But he's not wrong that, like, you know, as engine technologies have improved and, you know, developers have access to more and better tools, you know, we are seeing the average quality of indie games, smaller games, not even indie per se, you know, they're able to do more in terms of graphical fidelity, you know, which I think is obviously important. You know, it's the thing that you show, it's the screenshots, it's the trailers, everything stems from your graphical fidelity, and that's the thing that can get players through the door. If you've got a unique look or whatever going for you, that stuff matters. It's insane to assume that it doesn't, as much as we sometimes like to. So yeah, but at the same time, you know, having graphical fidelity because the Unreal Engine is fucking damn good these days doesn't mean that game's going to be any good. In fact, you know, in some cases it means like, oh, well, we spent all our time making this stuff look real nice and run real well, but boy, this is the most brain dead thing you've ever played. You know, like there's just sort of, you know, there's downsides to all of that stuff too, I guess, you know, and nothing is guaranteed. So yeah, I don't know. There's sort of a, obviously, you know, hey, like we don't need to rehash everything and to say like, hey, the game industry is still in a weird place. I think that there's just a lot of really, as we watch this stuff evolve, as we watch the technologies improve and evolve, there will be sometimes interesting opportunities that arise from that. But like at the end of the day, the games still have to be good, and the games still have to be interesting, and the games still have to be compelling. And I think the problem that a lot of developers are running into right now, and part of the reason why you see an erosion in that middle part of the game industry, or rather not the erosion, because the erosion happened before this was really a thing, but I think why we don't necessarily see this middle tier of games rising back up from the ashes is that today's players don't necessarily want it, or rather they're not checking for it. They're interested in the blockbusters, and they're interested in the ongoing live service, free to play, you know, like their time is already spent. If they're already playing Fortnite, or they're already playing Warzone, or they're already playing Roblox, or, you know, like whatever, there's like 5 or 6 different games that kind of fall into that bucket of just like, yeah, you know, like I could go spend $50 to $70 on this like mid-tier game if it existed, but like I'm already doing this other thing. I don't, you know, like that's cool, but like the idea that I get, like the idea that AAA or rather AA needs to exist, I think comes from this notion of just like there are players' needs that aren't being met. And I think that a lot of players' needs are being met pretty well. Could you grow the industry by bringing back that tier of game, that kind of middle, you know, your front lines, fuel of war, you know, like whatever, all this stuff that THQ made and Midway and, you know, the Suffering. If we were getting more games like the Suffering, but they were coming out and they were $70, would you, you know, like a modern equivalent of the Suffering, would you feel okay paying $70 for a game that falls into a Homefront style bucket? You know, I like the Darkness a lot. But if someone made a game that had that vibe, how many people would line up to pay $70 for it? And how many people would already be playing something else? You know, how many people would be like, oh, that's interesting. Maybe when it comes to, you know, PlayStation Plus or something, I'll check it out. When that game shows up on Game Pass, I'll play it. You know? And so if you don't have that like launch day excitement around a game, and you have players that'll just like, oh, well, you know, like that's something that if you shoved it in their face as part of a recently added to Game Pass list, and they looked at it and went like, huh, I guess I could just play this. There's a lot of games that fall into that bucket, and a lot of games that fall into that bucket you would look at and go like, you know, if this came out in a different era, you might consider this a AA game. Maybe not budget wise. Who knows what they spent and who cares? But yeah, it's a very strange. Yeah, like I agree with what Sean Layden is saying here in broad strokes, right? That like The industry is maybe a little too blockbuster driven. It's always been a hit driven business, you know, but like the size of the hits varied because the size of the budgets varied. Now we're cranking out everything in 4K, and so the assets are going to cost money, you know, so suddenly you're, well, okay, we're either going to build these ourselves or we're going to have a massive outsourcing team, and then some crew of people in Singapore is going to make all this stuff for us, and then we're going to have it, you know, like we're going to go to Keywords and say, make this, and Keywords is going to say, no, we're too busy acquiring everyone so that we can be the next Embracer. And who knows? There are a lot of ins and outs to it, I guess I should say. And so it's not quite as simple as like bringing AA back. And it's never been as simple as like back in my day, if the game was fun, we greenlit it. That's not, I don't know. I've been doing this a pretty long time. I feel like there's definitely games where it's been like, hey, this game was amazing and fun and we had to make it and whatever else. But it was like, hey, this game was amazing and fun and it was a great idea. And then we had to build a business case for why it needed to get made. And then we were able to make it, and so on and so forth. Like it's not, the industry has not been that freewheeling in forever. Since the 90s or something, right? I mean, it's not the business it was, and it hasn't been for a long time. This business has been moving, and you know, hey, any maturing industry is going to go through this, right? Where, you know, when I first started going to things in the early 90s, 92, 93, this industry was very freewheeling. This industry was very like, and you know, it was shitty. It was like, you know, it was a lot of really shitty, fucking uncomfortable parties. It was a lot, you know, it was not a great place for women. It still isn't, but it was, you know, but it was more so then. And it was an old boys club, and it was this and it was that. Like there are a lot of really fucking terrible things you could say about what the game industry was like in the 90s. You could say it was run by, in America at least, it was run by fucking cigar chomping sales guys who didn't know jack shit about video games. They were just taking stuff over from Japan and going like, the kids will love this, rah! You know, and whatever. And so it was this kind of freewheeling thing. And you did have a little more lead with your gut style decision making in some of these cases, because the data wasn't as sophisticated, the internet wasn't there. Like there were a lot of reasons why the entirety of the business was just kind of whatever, man, we're figuring it out. Because it was still, I mean, it continues to be a very young industry in the grand scheme of things, right? But like then it was, you know, it was just fucking all over the place. And then, you know, little by little, companies grew. EA started making more money. Vivendi started doing this, you know, like as these companies, Sierra, like all these companies started making more and more money. And as they made more money, they wanted to make more money. And so some of these companies started going public. For me, that was the big thing. When video game companies started going public, when the major consumer electronics companies like PlayStation and I guess, you know, Microsoft, when they started having massive success in the console space and they were already these large, huge corporations, you started seeing more and more of it buttoning up because there was suddenly a lot more money getting into it and suddenly a lot more risk getting into it. And suddenly everyone was like, okay, no, we have shareholders now, motherfucker. Like, this is not like this party needs to be less fucking fucked because we're a responsible business. And so in some ways, and it's still not there. And will it ever be there? Maybe. But, you know, at some point it's a larger societal problem that is more than just video games. But like, hey, as they started buttoning it up a little bit, they started on the business side. And the parties were still gross and fucking weird and whatever else, right? Not all of them. I don't want to paint the entire business that way, but you know, booth babes existed for a long time in ways that you're just like, why are we doing this? And, you know, again, the thing I always say is like, why are we, you know, hey, the internet is full of pornography. You don't need to like put spokesmodels in my face all the time. It just doesn't need to, you don't need to do it. I can enjoy that sort of stuff on my own time in a variety of ways. I wonder when the last time, and I'm sure the answer is actually probably yesterday or something like that, because, you know, there are still sales dudes everywhere. You'll never escape them all. But I was going to say, I wonder when the last time there was a like large scale or you know, like a company funded outing to a strip club. When was the last time that happened? And I'm sure the answer is like, again, like it probably just happened because like, we were pitching the Walmart guys on taking more copies of our game, and you know, then we said, let's go out and party tonight, and you know, whatever. I'm sure that stuff still happens, but not with the frequency that it probably used to. Anyway, I guess my overall point here is that this industry has been buttoning up in a variety of ways over time. And for me, it was when companies started becoming publicly traded. You just saw a lot more guys wearing ties all of a sudden. And you're like, oh, I guess video game makers do wear ties. Huh. That's not. Tom Kalinske was a tie wearing dude for sure, but he's the head of the thing. He's the business. You know, he's like whatever. But like, you just saw a lot more people wearing collared shirts and ties, and you know, like it just started looking more like a business. And you're like, okay, and that's what it is now. And you know, it always has been that, but you know, now there's so much more money on the table. There's so much more risk. There's so much more this and so much more that it is significantly more buttoned up. Like I said, that's not to say that there aren't still fucking travesties happening all over the place in this business. I don't want to belittle that. But comparatively speaking, this is a much different business than it ever used to be. And for me, that started changing in the 90s. You know, and at least in the US. That was, man, it was 2000? No, I guess it was 2001. When I went to London to cover ECTS, which was before Gamescom was a thing, ECTS was the kind of the UK European trade show of choice. And that's where I saw The Fifth Element running on a PlayStation for the first time. I'm like, oh my gosh. Sony had a party there. And out of the UK just didn't get the memo for a really long time, or like the UK just fucking they kept the fires fucking lit, man, because that party was fucking one of the craziest fucking things I had seen in a long time. That was that had been the first time in a long time, and also the last time for a very long time that I had someone come up to me and be like, "You want to go to the bathroom?" I was like, "Oh gosh, whoa, what the fuck?" UK doing it fucking for real. Jesus Christ, man. But you know, I don't know. In the UK, the PlayStation brand, I think, got kind of tied to rave culture ever so slightly, and you know, their parties reflected that to a certain extent, and that was interesting. That was such a dramatic shift from where the US was at the time. Even by 2000, I think it was 2001. It was a really dramatic, like, it was a change of pace for sure. There was like, oh my God, what the hell? This is a much crazier, people here are way more fucked up than people usually get at parties in the States. That was my general feel for it there, but I don't know. Yeah, that's neither here nor there, I guess, but like, that's, I was reminded of that talking about all of this. So yeah, you know, what do you do with this concept of like, we got to bring back AA games? I don't know that you can actually do it. I don't know when I don't know where it comes from. I don't know where that gets funded. I don't know if players would want it unless you're giving them a break on the price. And then you're just kind of running into the same level of risk where you're just like, oh, this is a lower budget, but also we're only going to sell it for $30. So yeah, I guess we lose less money, but like also the upside is way lower. And so why are we taking this chance at all when we could just be all in? It's the problem is that everyone's just all in on blockbusters because those are the biggest swings they can take that have the biggest return, and they want that big return. I guess. The fuck do I know, I guess. Speaking of Spider-Man 2, it's coming to PC in January, which is a bit of a faster turnaround than some of the other PlayStation to PC moves, I guess, but not super fast. This is going to be the same game you get on PlayStation in terms of like it's got they added suits and stuff post launch. This version will have all of that. They took some time in this announcement to also say, "Hey, we're not putting any new story content out." That has been kind of the hook of a lot of these stories is like, oh, I guess they're done with Spider-Man 2, but like, Spider-Man 2 is kind of old at this point. I think it would be weird if they put out more DLC now. I mean, one might think that they could put out another Miles Morales sized game or something, but even that, because Miles Morales, I guess, started as DLC and then they spun it out into its own standalone thing. And so do they do that again eventually? I don't know. Like they've got other games in the works, for sure. Like, hey, not to go back to the AA thing for too much more, but like that is a case where I think that worked, where like Miles Morales to me was a great smaller scale game where it was a little bit smaller than base level Spider-Man 1. And I preferred it to a great degree over the original Spider-Man. And so that's why I look at it and go like, hey, if we're talking about ways for them to make more money on Spider-Man 2, it's repurposing a lot of Spider-Man 2 to make a Venom thing or whatever. I don't know. Another, I guess you can't do another Miles Morales thing because Spider-Man 2 is all, a lot of Miles Morales as well. So you got to figure out what you're making. But yeah, all of the content they released after the PlayStation 5 game came out will be in this PC version. They've not gotten into the nitty-gritty of, what is going to be done to it in terms of what upscaling technologies it will support and so on and so forth. And but that'll be out in January on personal computers. Last story here. Netflix has closed down their big budget game studio, which was known as Team Blue. Steven Totillo's Game File got to the bottom of this and found out that that Netflix had maybe gotten out of this business. This was the studio that had Chaco Sonny was there. Joseph Staten was a part of this. Let me look at this video games chronicle.com recap of it here. Raf Grassetti, who was an art director at Santa Monica Studio, was also over there. So yeah, Netflix at one point decided that they wanted to make like a big budget game studio. And so they opened it and they hired some talent away from other studios out there. And this was Chaco Sonny's studio, I guess. He was, calling shots or whatever on it. So he'd run Overwatch previously to this. And so they had brought a bunch of people in there and I don't know what they made, but now they're done. This was, when was this? This was October 2022 that this studio was launched. So kind of still on the tail end of money being what it used to be instead of what it is now, I guess. Like there was, you kind of, I forgot that Mike Verdu was over there too. Yeah. He's their vice president of games. So this is from Video Games Chronicles' original story about the studio getting announced. This is from Mike Verdu at a TechCrunch event. We're starting another organic new studio in Southern California. This time around, Chaco Sonny, who oversaw production on God of War Ascension for Santa Monica and oversaw a portfolio of their games, and then was executive producer of Overwatch. He could have gone anywhere. He could have raised money. He could have done anything, and he chose to come here. We're building a team around him and looking to him to reinvent what games can be. Yeah, no pressure. Just get out there and reinvent what games can be, huh? And hop to it. Because we're going to crack down on password sharing because things are about to go weird for Netflix. So, and then Mike Verdu also said, you don't get people like that coming into your organization to build the next big thing in gaming unless there's a sense that we're in it for the long haul and the right reasons. Whoops. I don't mean to laugh because it's like it sucks that they shut down a studio and all that stuff, but Jesus Christ. So yeah, there aren't really any details on what this studio was working on, if they had ever like coalesced and solidified around a project, or if they were still trying to figure it out. But the kind of big name heads of the studio are all gone, and the studio has apparently been shut down. Again, that's according to GameFile, Steven Totillo's newsletter. Netflix in video games just seems like a fucking whatever, man. Like maybe I would feel a little bit different about it if I had a Netflix account, but I don't. And so it is this thing of Netflix putting out games on phones that you need to have a Netflix subscription to play. And it's just the fucking most backwards ass business model of just like, I'm not going to fucking do that. I'm not going to jump through these hoops. Like if Netflix had its own platform to put these games on or something, I'd be like, okay. And if you're already a Netflix subscriber, then maybe that's a benefit to you. You just see it as a nice little bonus. But this just feels like, hey, we're making some games that a subset of people can play. And we're just going to assume that you're going to sign up. Like, I'm not going to sign up for Netflix. I'm just not. And so when Netflix goes and announces they've put out another thing, I'm like, okay, you might as well have done nothing here because I don't have a Netflix subscription. So fucking good on you, I guess. I don't know. It just feels like such a gross way to build it. And again, maybe I would feel less dramatic about it if I just had a Netflix subscription and liked Netflix, but I fucking don't. So there you go. That's it for the news. Yeah, the interest rates changed, and now all the free money isn't free anymore. So everyone's got to look at all the decisions they made back when interest rates were in a different place and money was free, and all the studios they started and money they borrowed, and it's just part of this ongoing fucking horrible reckoning from people who made a bunch of bad calls and figured that, like, again, that pandemic spending trends were going to last forever. I don't know how many people were a part of that team. The Team Blue stuff, the Netflix stuff is like, I don't really know how many people they had. Maybe that information will come out now that the basics of the story are out there. Be curious to see what happens, or what the actual damage was on that front. Why don't we get into some emails? podcast@guard.bike is the email address. You can send in emails to me and I will do my best to answer them, as long as the questions are good, or at least relatively well written, within reason. Shorter the better, I'll say. If you're writing paragraph after paragraph after paragraph, it's a little harder for me to just read out 800 words on a podcast. So keep that in mind. A beer from Melbourne, Australia writes in. It says, I was a GameSpot kid growing up. I'm 32 now. And one of the series I remember watching was the development diary around Black Powder Red Earth. How did that series come about, and how did the staff feel about it at the time? Also, did that game ever come out? So yeah, we did this. Yeah, Black Powder Red Earth was supposed to be a video game. This was this guy. It was a dude who was friends with Tim Tracy, who was one of the video producers, and he decided he was going to work on a game. And they did eventually ship it. There is a thing on Steam released in 2021 that is called Black Powder Red Earth. It took a long time to get there. It turned into graphic novels and all of this kind of other stuff. The dude behind it is like an influential grindcore musician, and I cannot remember his name right now off the top of my head. But like he in the years like this, it took a bunch of years for this to kind of become anything. We did this series, it was like following the development of this thing that then, this was probably 20 years ago that we were doing this. Yes, John Chang is his name. Yes. Thank you, chat. It took a lot of really weird turns. Like it became some graphic novels, and then at some point, like the company that is listed as the company that is responsible for Black Powder Red Earth also started making like upper receivers for M4s and a bunch of like fucking rail systems for rifles and like all this insane shit that you're just like, wait, what? Like they just started making gun parts. And I was like, I don't understand how this any of this happened. But like it's just a really I don't know what the fuck. This dude's interests are all over the place. He wanted to make a video game about Mars and tactical Mars stuff, and then also make a bunch of grindcore over the years that is very well regarded with Discordance Axis, and then also fucking gun parts. It's just like, what do you? Okay, sure. But yes, at some point, Black Powder Red Earth did become a game. Yeah, Gridlink, yes, is the other thing. Yeah, I don't know. At some point, Black Powder Red Earth did make its way onto Steam as a game. I think I did try it at some point a couple of years ago and was like, all right. Like, I don't remember this being the thing that they were saying they were going to make, but obviously it's been decades. And so, it's a long road between here and there. So yes, that thing did eventually come out in some way, shape, or form. Weird, right? We got another old GameSpot email here, so let's get them both out of the way. Tyler from Ontario writes in and says, I was reading an article and saw the forums button on the bottom of GameSpot. I was surprised to see that they seem to be still generating some decent traffic, with System Wars leading the way for posts. I took a quick glance, and while it's a little different, the spirit seems the same. It got me thinking back to the early 2000s when I admittedly frequented that place. As someone who wasn't even a teenager at the time and had only been on the internet for a few years, it was probably the most concentrated group of dumbasses, myself included, that I'd ever seen in one place. While I know that fanboys were arguing long before it came along, can you think of a website to actively promote or designate a spot for that to happen prior to GameSpot? What was the view of it internally? I assume it was a pretty strong generator of traffic, but do you remember how it compared to other parts of the site? It was not the forums were never like so the thing about forums, especially these days, but kind of always the case, forum traffic might as well, like at some point it might as well not exist. It doesn't help you. It helps you in like a big roll up of like, what's your big ComScore number or whatever, but it is incredibly low value traffic. It is like a wrestling program, in terms of advertisers don't give a shit about it. They view it as like not valuable ad space. And so when, if you're going to sell them ads and put it on forums, they don't want that. They don't want to be next to that shit. They want to be on the homepage. They want to be places that people actually see and not on forums. And so the forums are, but also I don't remember it ever, like it was back then it was never a strong generator of traffic, more so than the site itself. It was never something we were like, at no point did anyone ever say we've got to get forum traffic up. It was never a consideration. No one cared. As for, so the system war, if you don't remember, the System Wars message board was a place for people to fanboy out and argue with each other about all that dumb shit. And I've told the story before, but just to recap it here because we are getting questions. That forum started because like we were seeing that shit pop up in the message boards we actually cared about. And I believe it was Joe Fielder's idea to just start a message board and go, let's put all these fucking idiots over here. I don't know that he said fucking idiots, but they were fucking idiots. It was like, let's put these fuckers over here. Let them quarantine them over here and let them have their stupid fucking fights. And Jesus Christ, who cares? And so I don't know. That's how I always viewed it. I don't like, no one who was writing for the site was ever like, what is System War? Like no one. It was just like, ugh, these fucking people. Jesus Christ, who cares? Like those people like, and yeah, you could argue that like, if you don't want that mentality to exist, you probably should have just banned it in the first place and not created a board that contains it. Moderation, like I feel like people are a little bit smarter about community management these days, but also community management is a different thing now, because they aren't platforms that you control wholly like a message board. So I can say with a certain amount of authority that I don't know anyone there who viewed it as anything other than a pain in the ass, because there were moderators who had to moderate it, and that took up way more time than any of those people deserved. And it was gross, and it fed a mentality that even then we were just like, this is fucking gross. And like most of the angry email we got about, because people used to have to send emails, most of the email we got about reviews were from people that had that mentality. It was people, it wasn't people going like, I think that game is better than that because of this, this, and this. It was like, you hate PlayStation and you like, it was just like, fuck these people. Like those people were just a thorn in everyone's side editorially. It's just like, fuck them, man. They're gross. Like they're like, it was a waste. They offered nothing, and maybe they should have just all been banned. I don't know. But yeah, I don't know. And then, eventually some of those people did get banned, and I think they went and started because that's how all message boards happen, right? Is like people get banned and they go start their own message board. They go, now we're all over here because the Nazi moderators, it's like, fuck off, dude. Jesus Christ. And that's how you get 4chan, is you end up getting banned from more and more places, to like suddenly all these people get kicked off Reddit, and then they go like, now we can post about what we really want to post about, and the internet is just gross. And it always has been. Let's see here. Some of these emails just came in recently, so it's kind of it's stuff that I haven't necessarily screened ahead of time. Andy wrote in, It said, I saw over the weekend that the Star Citizen developers needed to lay off staff and that the game's progression continues to stall out. As someone who believes the game may never reach 1.0, do you believe there will be consequences for this unbridled fundraising with so little delivery or maybe no playable delivery at all? Yeah, I don't, I know that they said that their single player thing was still like the Star Citizen people were like, our squadron whatever is still coming in, 2026 or, whatever it is, which that's not news. I feel like anyone covering release date information announced that far in advance as news is just getting fucking bamboozled, man. Deliver it. Star Citizen is in a point where you don't cover their announcements. You cover when they actually put a fucking thing out. And so but as for the question, do I think that there will be consequences for all of the fundraising? I don't. But I don't know enough about the fundraising that they have done. I know that there's a lot of ships that they have sold to people and whatever else, and there are people playing something. There is something that is referred to as Star Citizen to some degree. And they blew a bunch of money making that single player thing, and hey, maybe that'll come out eventually, right? In 2026, right? They just said so. So why wouldn't you believe them? So yeah, I don't know. I think it depends on the terms that they raise that money under, like how much money they raise from private investors and what the consequences are there if they don't, make it back, if those investors take over the company and sell off the tech but I don't think there's any danger of that happening because I think they have enough people that are still probably willing to dump money into that thing because they're like weird believers. There are people that come out of the woodwork about Star Citizen at times and try to sell you on this idea that like, no, it's a thing and I love it. And you're like, okay, all right, you're okay, fine. I don't know that you're the most level-headed person that I've spoken with, but sure. And so, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. Like, what is Star? I don't want to know. It'd be. I could go check out Star Citizen someday, but the interest is not there because of all of these years of like delays and weird promises and the thing that they're making. Like all of this is just. It just seems gross. And so. If they make it, good on them. I hope that they make that thing. I hope that they put that thing out someday in like a finished or what is finished, right? What is a finished video game in 2024? Like they benefited from like they've been making that game long enough that the expectations for what an ongoing game looks like and what a growing living world looks like and what does a finished game look like? All that stuff has changed so much. Under their feet as they've been making it in ways that actually probably benefit them. And so gaming has, if anything, become more friendly to the idea of a game like Star Citizen, just in terms of, hey, there are plenty of other ongoing games. There are plenty of early access games and all of that. They're just an extreme case of both. As far as I can tell. And so, yeah, I don't know. Like if they, they ship different bits and pieces of it over time, but like their scope of what that thing is supposed to be is so grand and so out of control that like, what does any of that mean? Like, even if they ship that single player thing, like, okay, well, how does it tie into the rest of the game? Does it? Is it just a standalone thing that people buy separately? Do I need to have spent $3,000 on spaceships to get access to the single player campaign? Like, what even is it? How will it exist? How will one interact with this? And what will it mean for the greater game of Star Citizen? Will it exist separately and you'll just get like, oh, if you buy the single player game, then you get, an extra skin in the MMO, or, is it as separated as that? Who knows? Because they changed so many things. So, like the scope or whatever of that thing has changed so dramatically over the last 45, 50 years now. That, you know, I guess what I'm saying is, I don't necessarily keep current on it because it's not worth it. So a lot of this stuff is from, you know, the last time I checked in on it and last time I tried to keep up on it, which is kind of a while ago now. But I haven't seen anything in the time since then that has made me change my thoughts on what Star Citizen is, quote unquote, or will be rather. And so I just, yeah, I don't know. It's not worth following. And you could sit there and go like, oh, well, they just announced that this is good. Well, they just said you're wrong because they just said this. It was like, okay, they've said a lot of things. They've said plenty of things about that game. And I don't think they have a credibility on any of that ever. They can say that, you know, Squadron whatever is coming out in a couple of years. Like, yeah, okay, sure. Okay. I'm going to devote zero brain power to any of that until it's right here. You can buy it. Hey, guess what? That thing is out now. Like, it is beyond Duke Nukem Forever levels of like, hey, this thing's coming out, you know? Because they've been raising money and doing all this other weird stuff along the way. And so you just look at it and go like, oh boy. And it may not be a scam for the end user. It sure looks like one at times. It may be a very clear cut, like, hey, yeah, you can, you know, these are the prices. Like, yeah, sure, you don't have to spend $1,000. You could just spend 40 or 30 or whatever, you know, but we'll happily take your money if you want a fancier ship or you want this or you want that. Like, you know, that's. If players want to whale out on Star Citizen and spend thousands of dollars on it, who am I to stop them? I don't think that's a great idea. But, all right. If that's what you want to do, do it. Like, if you're digging where that game is at right now, more power to you. I don't think that's the greatest. But hey. Nokia fanboy writes in and says, why is the PSP seen as a flop? I'm just going to stop right there and say, I don't think that that's true. I don't think the PSP is viewed as a flop. I think that the PSP petered out in a way that was kind of weird in terms of first party support and where the PSP eventually went. And some of that stuff is a little like the last days of PSP are maybe not amazing, but anyway, when it launched, it was so ahead of its time and really saw no threat from mobile graphics all the way up until the Vita launched. Sony actually made a ton of great games for it, and third parties really jumped on making exclusive PSP games too. On top of all that, the hardware was amazing at a time when Nintendo dropped the ball. The DS was a terrible bit of hardware. I might also stop there and be like, hey, no. Like, the DS had some, you know, you could maybe find some areas in the DS that could have been better, sure. But the DS is pretty good too. I have nothing but amazing memories of the PSP, and I just find it a shame that Sony handled the Vita so badly. Sadly, though, I wouldn't want to see a new portable from Sony because it'll just be like a Steam Deck without the amazing flexibility that Valve affords us. Yeah. Well, you're right there. The PSP was awesome. The DS was awesome. I'll say when the DS launched, I was I was not super sold on it. Like, there were definitely like early days of DS that I was like, I don't know, man, this is interesting technology, but like, look, like Rub Rabbits is cool. It's not going to get the job done, but it's neat that it exists. I don't know. Like, what the fuck are we doing? Like, it was just like stuff about the early days of the DS that felt weird. And then whether it was the DS Lite or the DSi or whatever, you know, as they revved that hardware, they got to an amazing place on it. The DS is fucking awesome. Could it have used a right stick that actually was supported? Sure. Imagine if the DS had launched, or, you know, even the 3DS. Imagine if either of those platforms had launched with a second analog stick and developers actually took advantage of it. What that might look like. That would have been fun. The PSP is fucking rad, dude. I do not view that thing as a flop at all. I think the industry changed over the course of its lifespan. And I think that latter day PSP development fell, like, basically they got on the other side of it, where initially it was very interesting and cool that the PSP could kind of approximate console games. But I think by the time we got to the end of the PSP, the realization had come of just like, okay, maybe we don't want console games in a handheld format. Maybe we want something that is a little bit more bite-sized in scope, or play sessions or whatever. And so, putting the PSP in sleep mode was never a great experience. Whereas I think the DS, in some cases, not all, but in some cases, they built more around that in smarter ways than I think Sony did. And I think that, there's the memory stick was a problem, but I'd also say that, like, the DS to the 3DS was an interesting transition as well. And yeah, I don't know. The Vita was just not. The Vita kind of just continued to lean in. Remember that Uncharted game that came out on Vita? Like, I don't necessarily think that that's a bad game. I just don't think it's a fun portable. I don't think it's a very portable game. And it's interesting now that, like, the hot handheld thing is just a full-on fucking handheld PC. But it's led to this situation of just like, a lot of these smaller games, indie games, what have you, are games that can have these shorter session times and work pretty well in a handheld format. Not every PC game is a great portable game, especially in a situation where you're actually taking it places and might not have internet the entire time and all of that sort of stuff. There's a lot of weird logistics there, of course. And I think that ends up being some of my problems with the Switch, is like they made a handheld and didn't make a lot of handheld games. And we've had people write in, like, initially the pitch on the Switch was, wow, now all of Nintendo's, like, software development forces are going to be pushing in the same direction on the same platform. That's incredible. Because they used to have to split and be like, okay, we're going to make some console games, we're going to make some handheld games, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And so, you resulted in kind of one would get the short end of the stick a little bit at times. But the Switch doesn't have a lot of first-party handheld games on it. A lot of games that feel like the way handheld games feel. I've been playing a lot of original Game Boy games lately. Kirby's Pinball Land, for example. But I've just been, like, messing around with the Game Boy library and the Game Boy Color library, and, like, seeing those games and seeing how they were built and how they were built with portability in mind. Or, like, hey, you need to, especially later on in the Game Boy's catalog. Early days, battery backup was not as much of a thing. And so are you writing down passwords? What are you doing? But as that went on, as they got to be better and better at, like, nailing the idea of what it means to be a portable game, the games feel very different in terms of, like, where they let you save, what you do, what like where you can do it. And I think all of that stuff is really important. And I think that, like, that the Switch doesn't do that for whatever, and the reasons are not that hard. Like, of course, hey, you have more power at your disposal. You have the idea of this might be docked to a TV, so you're going to make games that look more like console games, and that's just how it went. But it feels like we lost something, and you see it in some indie games on the Steam Deck where it's like a little bit of that magic feels like it's there, and you're like, you know what? This is a really cool game to just pick up and put down over and over again. But we don't get it the way we used to. And ultimately, I would say that was the problem with the PSP that they kind of doubled down on with the Vita, is that you look at a lot of those first-party Vita games and some of the other stuff that was happening on the Vita. They said, look at all this amazing graphical power. We can make games that look just as good as their console counterparts. Look at this screen. You're like, okay, that's cool. I don't want a game like that on this. I need something smaller. I need a shorter session. I need to be able to save more often. I need a game that's not going to try to connect to servers all the time. Like, what are we doing? You know, like, just there were aspects of that experience where they just kind of made they made some bad calls, you know. And third parties were, you know, much like with the Switch, I think, you know, third parties just didn't give a shit. You know, EA's just like, here's fucking Need for Speed Most Wanted 510 edition. It's the same game, but a little worse. You're like, dope. I don't need a handheld enough to, like, where this is going to be the, I'm going to play the shitty version of this game. I don't play the version that looks like a PS2 port instead of playing the, you know, the full-fledged PS3 version. You know, like, they're just like weird balance of games between consoles and handhelds on the Sony side, for sure. Yeah. Nathan from Tumwater, which I assume is in Washington, writes in and says, I also wonder why they don't make a new Killzone. Everybody wants something to play on PlayStation. Why don't they make an open world game? So with regards to Killzone, there was just a story today on Eurogamer that so this is from a Washington Post story that comes from, this is an article about Lego Horizon Adventures, interestingly enough, on the Washington Post. And so they're interviewing Roy Postma, who's the art director at Guerrilla, and he's got a quote about Killzone in here that Eurogamer has plucked out of here. And basically, let's see here. So according to art director Roy Postma, Guerrilla's decision to start working on the Horizon series was a conscious choice by the developer, and one that would see it move away from the darker and more violent Killzone games the studio was initially known for. And here's the quote. We were done with it as a team. As a studio, we needed to refresh the palette. It was, by choice, the opposite of Killzone. So, yeah, I mean, that's good that they were able to do that they were afforded the opportunity to make that change. Because a lot of studios get locked in. Like, hey, you're gonna, you know, like, I don't necessarily think getting locked in is a bad thing, but, you know, like, a studio just got renamed to Halo Studios. What do you think they're going to be making for the next 20 years? You know what I mean? They're not going to suddenly go from Halo to a Horizon style game. You know what I mean? So I think it's cool that Guerrilla was able to make that change. I think there is a part of me that I just, you know, Killzone has such a striking visual aesthetic, even if you could make the case that is just Jinro. They just took the visual style of fucking Jinro and made it. The Hellgas are just that. And I'll say, yeah, they did, but it's still cool. Killzone had a really good visual aesthetic. It was not an amazing, like, that's the thing, like, everyone needs to remember, Killzone was never an incredible, like, amazing, like, this is the best game I've ever played. Look at this shooter. This is the greatest. They were good shooters at a time when the bar was a little lower for shooters. And they did some really neat stuff with their competitive multiplayer that, like, didn't get the credit for it that it probably deserved. And also it got saddled with the dumb, like, it's a Halo killer. Like, it got saddled with that horse shit. And so it needed to be more than it was because it suddenly was a Halo killer and suddenly it needed to be the biggest game. And when it wasn't that, there were people who were disappointed and like, okay, sure. Like, that, whatever. That, the expectations, I think, were unfair in that situation. The Killzone games are fine. That first one, I will actually say I don't think Killzone 1 is a very good game. Some people liked that game. I thought it was kind of a disaster, but at least they took some chances, and came up with that aesthetic and all that sort of stuff. But like around Killzone 2 and then 3 is where they figured out, like, okay, here's how we're going to make this a fun playable game and whatever else. But at the end of the day, like, there were things about that campaign that I think felt a little second class in ways about both those campaigns, where you're like, this is fine and fun, but it's weird. And of course, once you get on the PlayStation 3, the PlayStation 3 controller was kind of dog shit for first person shooters, because of the way those triggers felt. And so that they had to make weird choices around some of that stuff as well. But like, they're good games. Like I remember rating them reasonably highly. And then of course the Killzone 2 trailer ended up being a whole fucking, they walked into a lot of fucking rakes on that one that they did not put down themselves. Like, I don't think Sony ever once marketed that game as a Halo killer, but people, whatever, the press fucked that up for them and put a bunch of extra bullshit on them, and that sucked. But like, some of the other expectations that were placed on those games, they did kind of do to themselves. I think, but again, I think the thing they did in multiplayer, like the multiplayer again, was not always amazing. It was a little slower paced than some of the other games on the market, or a lot of the games that were about to come to market, I guess, in some cases. But they did that one mode, and this is the mode. This is my go-to thing when we talk about Killzone. But it was that mode where, like, it was a longer session game. It was like a round-based thing, and then the game mode would change. So you'd play team deathmatch for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or whatever it was, and then suddenly it would turn into a VIP, and then suddenly it would turn into capture the flag, and suddenly it would turn. And so you would, as you won rounds, things like that would, the round would end and the next one would start. And so you got to do a little bit of everything across these maps that were like a little bit larger and crazier than you saw in something like a Call of Duty. And I thought that was really cool. And I was surprised that we didn't see stuff like that happen. I can't think of a game that has done it quite that way. We've seen games where it's like, oh, every time at the start of every round, because the whole gameplay is going to stop and it's going to be round 3 and we're going to start again. We're going to do random loadouts, and maybe there's some changes to the mode or whatever. I know Call of Duty has done some limited time modes that have been something like that, but not the way Killzone did it. And I think it's surprising. It is surprising to me that no one has done something as directly as direct of a knockoff to that Warzone mode as Killzone used to have. But hey, I wonder, like, we're at about the time here. Like, I assume that we're going to get another Horizon game because, you probably make a trilogy, right? But or there was talk about the multiplayer Horizon game as well. If that materializes or not, I assume at some point we will see that, because I actually think that would be a good idea. You want to make a live service game based on Horizon? I think you could do it. I think you could absolutely do it. And you do that for a number of years, and then maybe you have Guerrilla go back and tie it off and do a Horizon 3 for PlayStation 6 at this point, I suppose. Squish's Muffin in the chat asks, Resistance or Killzone? I don't like Resistance. The Resistance games, I appreciate that they brought their brand of look at this weird gun to a non-Ratchet and Clank game, but I think the Resistance games are like dumb from a story perspective. Those campaigns, I do not like Resistance at all. It just, no part of that ever did anything for me. I just thought they were always so ugly looking, like just artistically, just like, ugh, yuck. Just did not like anything about the way those games looked or felt or any, just like, no, I just do not like the Resistance games. Never did. But I feel like, yeah, like that's probably what, like we end up with a multiplayer Horizon game, whether that's something Guerrilla does themselves or whether that some other team runs that because Guerrilla is going to work on Killzone or on Horizon 3 rather. And then that's probably it, right? I don't think you make like 9 fucking Aloy games, right? I mean, if the multiplayer thing comes out and is good and takes off, and then maybe that's got legs that it deserves its own sequel and whatever else. But just like the Horizon thing feels like it's kind of run its course to me, like already. And so I don't know. I look at it as they should probably do a third one. I was done with it about 2/3 of the way through the second one. And that's not to say that they're not good games. They are. They're very good games. I love that again, man. That first Horizon game was really awesome. It was really, really awesome. I'm very curious to see the Lego game, and I assume it just plays like a Lego game, right? I mean, that's exactly how it looks. But like, that'll be interesting to see, like in its entirety. The trailers and stuff have looked good for what it is, and yeah, this looks rad. I'm sure this will be like a good Lego game. Will it be good for kids who will have no idea what Horizon is? I don't know, probably. At some point, you're just bashing fucking weird animals and dinosaurs, and they're blasting apart into Lego bits, and it's probably cool. It's probably cool. And as much as I don't know that a remaster of Horizon Zero Dawn is like a great idea, I'd say if you were to sit me down, and I am sitting down, and say, "Hey man, do you want to play some Horizon?" I would probably say no. But also, if you said, no, you have to, I would probably rather play the first game again than go back and try to finish the second one. So, in some sick way, I am looking forward to the remaster of the first game because I'll probably play some chunk of that game again. And I think the story beats in the second game hit a wall at a certain point, and you're just like, dude, this clone of Aloy, like, fuck this. I just don't care anymore. It just dragged on. Like, the pacing of it was what got me. Like, I hit a wall where I'm like, I have done a lot of fucking animal trapping, and I'm fucking real good at getting all these resources, and I have fucked shit up real good. It's a good fucking time. But this story is dragging and taking forever to get anywhere. I am, and as soon as you interact with Gaia and all, I'm just like, fuck, all right, dude. Maybe I don't know every single story beat but I see how this is playing out, and I look at this and go like, yep, okay, I'm fucking good, man. I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to do this. And I fell off that game as hard as anyone could. And then when it came out on PC, I was like, maybe this will be the time. And I started playing it again. I was like, nope. Turns out no. But I think those games are incredibly well made. Oh yeah, man. Mike from Santa Cruz writes in and asks, as you've gotten older, have you had any hand or joint issues related to or impacting your gaming? Do you do any exercises, stretches, or use anything to treat or prevent hand and finger problems? No, no. I've been lucky in that regard. It doesn't happen so much anymore. I used to get some pains in my wrists. I used to have a lot of situations where my ring finger and pinky finger on one or both hands would just occasionally go numb. And that was uncool. But that doesn't really happen so much anymore. I can't think of, like sometimes if I sleep on it weird, it'll happen. But no, I will occasionally, if I am playing a real intense game on a controller and I haven't done that in a little while because so many games are, you play a lot of menu games for a while and then you go back and, spend a lot of time playing a top-down shooter, like go play a bunch of Smash TV or something. Like sometimes I find myself, I press the D-pad harder than you need to. And occasionally that'll result in a, a little bit of left thumb soreness, but that's really it. I've been pretty lucky on that front. But I don't really do much of anything exercise wise, or I don't just, it's not, I have been lucky so far and not really had any major problems. Darkbeat says, I got tailbone pains now, so I can't sit in an office chair for very long. I will occasionally get some tailbone pain. Ever since I changed chairs, I will sometimes get a little tailbone pain depending on how I sit in said chair, which is frustrating because I bought this chair because the whole thing was like, this is a great ergonomic. I was like, okay, well, this is probably going to be a big step up from the garbage ass fucking gamer chairs I've had before. And then it turns out this chair is maybe even worse in some cases than some of those dog shit chairs. I almost brought my dog shit chair back in from the garage not too long after I got this one, but instead I just got used to this one. I don't know. I fucked myself up at PAX real bad and then never went to a doctor. And I probably should have gone to a doctor and said, hey, I fucked myself up real bad. But instead someone said, oh, there's nothing they can do for that. You know, you just got to wait it out. And so I was like, oh, okay, I guess I just won't go to a doctor. Where I fucking jumped off the stage at PAX onto a pillow, and then the pillow slid out from under me, and I landed directly on my ass, and my tailbone was fucked. And then I had to stand up. It was like at the end of the panel. So I get at the end of the panel. I don't know if you've ever been on a PAX panel, but at the end of the panel, a lot of people come up and they want to meet you, in theory. And so a lot of people are walking my way and wanting to take a bunch of smiling pictures with me. And I am fucked. Like, I am I am like in massive pain. And I'm like, okay, all right, well, we're just going to fucking like, okay. And so I'm taking pictures and I'm like, I'm fucking dying over here. All right, all right, we'll see how this goes, man. But you know, I got through that, and then like the flight back was impossible because my ass hurt so much. And then it, you know, eventually it went away, but occasionally like it comes back, or occasionally, you know, occasionally I don't know. I had a lot of lower back issues at times before that, and I will occasionally have a couple of times in the year where suddenly my back is just fucked for a few days, and you're like, okay, that's weird. And sometimes I wonder, is it because I landed on my ass so hard? Probably not. It's probably because I'm not in great shape, honestly. But yeah. I thought the pillow would be a cushion. It's a dumb thing. And my kids do this all the time now, and every time I say, don't do that. And then I halfway tell the story about me busting my ass. But they will jump off the bed onto some pillows. They'll jump off some couches onto some pillows. I'm like, don't jump onto the pillows, because when the pillow slides out from under you, those pillows are a motherfucker, man. They're gonna get your ass. They do not listen. They refuse to listen. They will not listen to reason. Ever. Let's see here. Last question from Night Dehumidifier. The other day I was listening to the St. Ides 1994 promo tape that featured Snoop, MC8, Wu-Tang, and Ice Cube rapping for around a minute about the greatness that is St. Ides malt liquor. If you had to assemble a number of performers to rap about a specific energy drink brand, who would you choose and why? I don't know. I'd do like a grindcore tape about Four Loko. Does that count? Does that count as, I mean, that's technically old Four Loko, back when it was an energy drink. Because I think that sums up the experience of drinking Four Loko. It's like grindcore happening in your head. Sort of. I would do a Judgment Night style mashup of rappers and non-rappers, but all the non-rappers would be grindcore acts. And you'd be like, Nori, it's time for you to rap over this fucking, over these blast beats. And he'd be like, what? The fuck am I, what? Come on. And it would be impossible. It'd be impossible. Yes, Sparks. I miss Sparks. Oh, well. It's Cameron and AC mashed up together, finally. Let's see here. No, the St. Ides, look, those 90s St. Ides raps were way better, though. Those commercials were way better than they should have been, and I will always remember. Yeah, no, that was some good stuff. As far as hip hop and advertising, that and there's like the Sprite commercial that had Cool Keith in it. That's about it. That's about it. Anyway, that's about it for the show. Thanks everybody for listening and or enjoying. Let's see here. Normal schedule this week, so I'll be here on Wednesday to do some stuff, and I'll be here on Friday to rank some 8-bit Nintendo games. We'll play some stuff. Initially, I was thinking maybe I'll play some of this Sonic and Shadow thing. I don't think anyone wins on that one. I don't think there's any benefit to that. I said my piece. We don't need to belabor the point. But I'll find something. We'll play some video games tomorrow. As always, thanks everybody for listening and backing the Patreon over there at patreon.com/Jeff Gerstmann, or you can go to patreon.guard.bike, and I think that will get you there as well. Sign on up, get an ad-free version of the show and bonus content. New episode of the Hall of Fame went up recently, and I believe Glenn is back in town here, so I'm going to try to get him scheduled for the next Game Boys to Men here, and we'll pick up that story where it left off and get back to business. So everybody have yourself a great rest of your week, and I'll be back on Tuesday with another episode of The Jeff Gerstmann Show.